The Velvet Hammer, a man who ruled without firing a bullet. He wore silk suits, lived in a hotel fit for kings, and ran a city where laws bent like shadows at sunset. He wasn't a gangster, but gangsters worked for him. He never held the highest political office, yet governors bowed to him. And while the rest of America went dry during Prohibition, his city drank freely, danced recklessly, and gambled without fear. His name? Enoch Nucky Johnson. To the public, he was a gentleman politician. To the underworld, he was a boss without bullets, a king without a crown. And behind his polite smile lay a city built on sin and sealed with silence. Born into authority on a cold January morning in 1883 in the quiet town of Smithville, New Jersey, a boy was born who would one day become the invisible hand behind America's most corrupt seaside empire. His name was Enoch Louis Johnson, but he'd be known to history as Nucky. He wasn't born into poverty, nor into wealth, but something more dangerous: power. His father, Smith Johnson, was the sheriff of Atlantic County, a man whose handshake could settle disputes and whose silence could bury truths. From the beginning, Nucky paid attention. While other boys played in the fields, he watched courtroom hearings. He listened at doors. He understood how favors were exchanged in whispers, how threats could be wrapped in a smile. It wasn't just about enforcing the law. It was about owning the system that made it.
At just 22 years old, he followed in his father's path and became undersheriff. 3 years later, in 1908, he was elected sheriff himself. But Nucky wasn't satisfied with a badge. He didn't want to enforce rules. He wanted to bend them.
The fall that made him rise. Power, real power, didn't come from a uniform. It came from control over elections, jobs, and money. Nucky understood that, and so did his mentor Louis Commodore Kunle, the true political boss of Atlantic City at the time. The Commodore taught Nucky the art of deals, how to keep both criminals and cops in your pocket. But in 1911, the Commodore's empire cracked. A corruption scandal forced him out of the game. He was prosecuted, humiliated, and stripped of influence. Most men in Nucky's shoes would have walked away. But Nucky stepped in. At just 28, he became the new face of the Atlantic County Republican machine. Quietly, he took over where the Commodore had left off, running everything from police appointments to garbage collection. No favor went unpaid. No loyalty went unrewarded. And then came the position that gave him the keys to the kingdom. Atlantic County Treasurer, a role he would hold from 1914 to 1941. With control of the city's funds, jobs, and departments, he became the shadow mayor, the secret judge, and the unchallenged ruler. The city that sin built, Atlantic City, looked like a vacation dream. Boardwalks, hotels, and crashing waves. But beneath the postcard-perfect surface, Nucky was constructing something much darker. He allowed and profited from gambling dens, brothels, and backroom bars. Local business owners paid fees to operate. Police officers looked the other way because Nucky told them to. Everything ran like a machine, his machine. He didn't need violence to maintain order. He used control. He picked who got rich and who vanished into silence. He never shouted. He didn't threaten. He simply reminded people of what he could take away. And then came a moment that would define his legacy. In 1920, the Volstead Act was passed. Prohibition. The nation went dry. Alcohol was banned, but not in Nucky's Atlantic City. While other cities poured liquor down the drain, Nucky opened the taps wider. Atlantic City became America's wettest city, a haven for bootleggers, smugglers, and speakeasies. Ships unloaded crates of whiskey at night. Truck convoys rolled inland by day. Every bottle meant profit. Every shipment carried his silent signature. And all the while, Nucky moved through the Ritz-Carlton like royalty. The crown without a throne. If power was a drug, Nucky was its most elegant addict. He didn't just run Atlantic City. He orchestrated the entire experience. From the moment a tourist stepped off the train, they entered his world. Bellhops, cab drivers, hotel clerks, all took their cut, all paid their share, and all reported to the man in the raccoon coat and red carnation, always seen smiling on the 9th floor of the Ritz. He was a paradox, lavishly wealthy, yet never holding high public office. His influence didn't need elections, it needed loyalty, and he had it. But Nucky wasn't just interested in local affairs anymore. In 1929, he called together one of the most secretive and powerful meetings in American criminal history, the Atlantic City Conference. Al Capone, the fearsome face of Chicago. Lucky Luciano, the ambitious mind of the New York Mafia. Meyer Lansky, the quiet genius behind national syndicates. They met not in dark alleyways, but in hotel rooms overlooking the beach. They discussed bootlegging routes, territory disputes, profits, and peace. And Nucky, he didn't beg for respect. He sat at the head of the table. He wasn't feared for his fists. He was respected for his network. He was the man who could make illegal business look clean. The fall of the Velvet Hammer. The 1930s brought a chill to Atlantic City. Not in the breeze from the Atlantic Ocean, but in the whispers of federal agents, accountants, and prosecutors. For the first time in decades, Nucky Johnson felt eyes on him he couldn't control. He had built an empire so perfectly layered, so deeply rooted that even corruption felt like tradition. But in Washington, new winds were blowing. The government, embarrassed by years of unchecked crime during Prohibition, wanted to make an example, not of gangsters with guns, but of bosses in suits, and Nucky Johnson was target number one. The investigators knew they couldn't trap him with bootlegging charges. He was too careful, too many layers away from the transactions. But there was one weakness he hadn't hidden well enough: money. As Nucky paraded around in $1,200 suits, diamond rings, and silk ties, the IRS quietly began counting his income. What he flaunted in public didn't match what he declared on paper. They didn't need proof of crime, they needed proof of dishonesty. And in 1939, they got it. Indicted for tax evasion, Nucky was suddenly no longer the man throwing parties. He was the man standing in court, listening to accountants describe every unreported dollar. His smile faded. His silence broke. In 1941, he was convicted. The king of Atlantic City, the master of vice, the Velvet Hammer, was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison and fined $20,000, a sum he once could have paid without blinking. As the handcuffs clicked, the city he built didn't weep. It adjusted. His allies looked away. His enemies smiled quietly. And just like that, the man who ruled without a badge or a gun vanished from the skyline he once owned. Shadows of a fallen king. Nucky Johnson didn't serve all 10 years. In 1945, after just 4 years behind bars, he walked out of prison, not as a boss, not as a politician, not even as a legend. Just a man in a worn suit, holding his own silence. His fortune was gone. His position was erased. His name, once whispered with reverence, now carried the weight of scandal. Atlantic City had moved on. New faces controlled the votes. New hands held the envelopes. Nucky tried to live quietly. He worked as a salesman for an oil company, a job that once would have been beneath his valet. The man who once hosted Capone and Luciano, who drank champagne in presidential suites, was now making pitches at gas stations. He lived modestly, avoided attention, and rarely spoke about the past. If someone asked about his former life, he'd grin and say, it was all politics. But the glint in his eye told stories no one dared to hear aloud. The man who built a city on secrets died with most of them still locked inside. On December 9th, 1968, Enoch L. Johnson passed away in a nursing home in Northfield, New Jersey, at the age of 85. No crowds gathered, no headlines mourned him. But the boardwalk still stood. The casinos still flashed. The city he shaped with whispers and deals still carried the fingerprints of his empire. Legacy etched in vice. Time passed, names faded, but legends, they evolve. Decades after his death, Nucky Johnson returned, not in politics or newspapers, but in television. When HBO released Boardwalk Empire, millions were introduced to a fictional character named Nucky Johnson, played by Steve Buscemi. But behind the fiction was a real man. The show depicted violence, betrayal, bloodshed. But real Nucky didn't operate that way. He didn't order people taken out. He preferred manipulation, strategy, and control. Where others ruled with force, he ruled with favors. His empire wasn't built with bullets. It was built with paper, votes, silence, and bribes. He never held state office. Yet senators and governors sought his blessing. He never claimed to be a gangster. But the most dangerous men in America showed him respect. He was the perfect contradiction. A gentleman crime boss, a smiling tyrant, a political mastermind with a red carnation and a raccoon coat. Even in death, Nucky Johnson remains a symbol of how power doesn't always shout. It sometimes just whispers from the 9th floor of a luxury hotel. The man who never needed a gun. In the annals of American crime, we often remember the men with Tommy guns, cigars clenched between their teeth, blood on their hands. But Enoch Nucky Johnson, he ruled without drawing a weapon. He built an empire on vice, ran a city like a syndicate, and left behind a legacy that blurred the line between politics and crime forever. He didn't need to destroy his enemies. He simply made them irrelevant. He wasn't feared because of what he could do to you. He was feared because of what he could make you do to yourself.
The case may be closed, but Crimology never sleeps. Like and subscribe at Join Crimology and step deeper into the dark with us.